Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of Food for Thought. I am so excited to be sitting down with Katya. She has just graduated from high school and is now headed off to college, but I wanted to sit down with her to talk about her eating disorder recovery journey and how theater has played a huge part in her recovery process. Thank you so much for joining me, Katya. I'm so grateful to have you on today.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll just jump straight right into it. So just tell me a little bit more about you. Who are you? You know, I know she is an incoming college freshman, so maybe tell us a little bit about, where you're going to school. And then, so let's just start there. Short and sweet introduction.
So I just graduated Aragon High School, and now I'm off to Scripps College, which is in LA. I'm very excited, and I'm also pretty nervous, but it's going to be a change, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm so excited. You'll be with me down in SoCal. But it's so much fun down there, and I know you'll love it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about your background as a performer. When did you start? What have you been doing? And, maybe some roles, just anything.
I started community theater around the age of 6 or 7, and I was in a lot of shows just around my area. I lived in San Jose, so I did shows with Playful People Productions, and then we moved to San Mateo when I was 9, and I was in a lot of school productions. Some of my favorites were Into the Woods. I played the stepmother. Mamma Mia, I was ensemble. Grease, I was Betty Rizzo, which was really fun. Mean Girls, I played Katie Heron, and then my last show was Sister Act, and I was Sister Mary Patrick, and so yeah.
Yeah, all great shows. I've been to a couple of them because my sister, fun fact, is also in the show. So yeah, it was so much fun, and you're so talented. And yeah, I'm so happy that you got to grace the stage with your presence. So now getting a little deep, and you don't have to talk into, as you can say, as much detail as you want. It is all up to whatever what you're comfortable with. So feel free to speak as detailed or as general as you want. Just try to avoid certain numbers, maybe going super in-depth in your behaviors and stuff like that. You know what's triggering to most people. So if you think that what you have to say is triggering, just keep that in mind throughout the duration of the rest of this interview. So now we're going to talk just a little bit more about your eating disorder journey. Whatever you feel comfortable with. Again, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable sharing your story. Yeah, just give me a little bit of your insight about what that has been for you, what that journey was like, and where you are now.
Yeah, so my food rules started around the age of 7, which was much earlier than I realized at the time. And at that point, it was mostly tied to my OCD because I was really afraid of getting sick, and I was afraid sugar would make me throw up. But then I got treated for my OCD, but I would say that was kind of the bud of my eating disorder. And so over the years, my eating disorder really blossomed, I'd say. And then by the time I got to middle school, it was definitely just a downhill spiral. I'd say it was the isolation of COVID. So I was in 7th grade when it was probably the worst time of my eating disorder. And I remember it was over the summer, and someone on my dad's side of the family told me I had grown a lot. And I took that comment, and I was already a very self-conscious person. I was an early bloomer. I'm really, really insecure about myself. And so I took that comment, I just ran with it. And by the time December rolled around, I was very much in the depths of my eating disorder. And credit to my mom. She was the one who realized stuff was going on. I remember I would, I think kind of how it started showing up was I wouldn't eat snacks, and then I kind of started restricting more around meals, and my mom noticed, and so she took me to the doctor's office, and it was such a bad experience because the doctor was just like, they weight checked me, and they were just like, she's fine, and I was like, okay, I remember in my head, thinking, no, I'm not fine. Something's going on. But I didn't know how to say that, and I didn't now I know, looking back on this, I know that was my eating disorder. I really didn't want to say anything either because I didn't want to get better. I didn't want to change what I was doing. And so there was about a month in between that doctor's appointment and then my next one where I went in and the doctor was like, okay, like, you're not doing so great. Something needs to change. And so then my mom was like, she needs to be put in treatment. And I did get put in treatment. But I didn't want to be in treatment. And so it was very much throughout all of 8th grade and 9th grade, it was very much just a cycle of portraying to other people that I was getting better, but actually I wasn't really changing anything and I wasn't wanting to change anything. And so that really consumed like my entirety of middle school and the majority of high school as well, especially freshman and sophomore year. I mean, my freshman year of high school, I got put in a partial hospitalization program and I missed out on my whole entire second semester and I had to redo those classes later in the summer. But it was really hard. But I also look back on that time in my life and I also realized that was such a blessing as well, because when I was at my program, I was able to be around people who have eating disorders, and I felt also really alone, and I'm like, oh my God, these people like know what I'm thinking, they understand my feelings. And I also was around recovery counselors, and those are people who are fully recovered and they're just there to help you, and that did give me a lot of hope. And I saw they're okay, like they're actually like liking their life, they're living their life, and that also gave me a lot of reason to want to try to get better. And and I'd say I can get more into this later, but I'd say when my junior year rolled around is where I really was like, I'm choosing recovery for myself. And I'd say a lot of that played a big role in my musical theater, and the production of Grease that I did was my main motivation. And now I'm fully recovered now. I don't have any eating disorder thoughts at all. I feel really, really strong in my recovery, and I hope to continue that.
Wow. Well, your story, first of all, just the fact that it starts so young for you, 7 years old. I don't think a lot of people realize that these disordered thoughts and all of these habits, they start at a very young age. So the fact that, you're now 18, right? You're now 18, you like have been going through this since you were 7 years old, like 11 years. And the fact that, you're here now and you're strong, and you said you're full on in your recovery and you're doing it, for yourself. I just think that it's such a tribute to how strong you are. And very proud of you. I know I mentioned this in my last podcast. I was just talking with Tori just about how people who are fully recovered, they can look back on their time and realize that like I did that.
For sure.
It is such it's a very daunting and stressful and hard task to go through any sort of recovery process, especially eating disorders. So the fact that, you are here now, you are a great example of someone who is fully recovered. It is possible. Something that you mentioned was when the first time your mom kind of noticed something was off, and then you went to the doctor and they were like, you're fine. And also like the fact that you were a late bloomer and an early bloomer, right? And, so you were growing faster than the other people in your grade, I assume. I have experience with that too. That's exactly how my insecurity started, was because I just noticed that like I was bigger than the other people. I was growing, I was tall and all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, well, why can't I be the same, like as short as everyone else or as small as everyone else? And I think that is a struggle that a lot of people with eating disorders probably go through. And that's not to say that you're unhealthy or anything like that. It's just some people grow and mature faster than other people. So if you are going through that and you are watching this video, just be mindful of the fact that everyone grows throughout their lifetime, and I know that it's hard being the first person, but that shouldn't be a reason why you should do all these unhealthy habits, because they are very harmful and they can have lasting effects. So I hope that if you are struggling, that you find peace and find acceptance with the fact that you're just growing faster, and that's okay.
Yes, I so agree.
Yeah, and I wanted to just touch on that doctor aspect because it was actually brought up in my last one as well, about how sometimes doctors can be a little bit invalidating. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of doctors don't really understand eating disorders. I mean, now I'm with an eating disorder specialist, which is like very rare because I know a lot of people who have eating disorders just go to a regular doctor, and there's so much bias and stereotypes around what an eating disorder needs to look like, and BMI stuff, and it's just like everyone is just like supposed to look different, and you know, I struggle with anorexia, and I think there's very much a stereotype that anorexics are really thin, and like that's just not the case. There's a lot of anorexics who are considered larger bodied and fat, and that's okay, and that's just the way it is, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because I have a history of anorexia as well. I've never been underweight. My BMI has never been at an unhealthy level, and by the way, BMI is based off of a man's body type, so keep that in mind also. But yeah, I think that it can be so hard because I think in society, just doctors and within the general society, everyone has this kind of idea of what it means to be anorexic. You can only see your bones, you're like severely underweight, you can barely get out of bed, and all of these things. When I will say, like, there's a significant amount of people who suffer from anorexia who are functioning people in society, aren't underweight, aren't stick thin. Some people have muscles and everything like that. And
I'd say that's the vast majority of people.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, at least from what I've seen and what I feel like eating disorders are nowadays, is because it's so normalized, everyone just goes along and probably has unhealthy habits with food that are considered to be disordered eating, but no one even realizes it.
Exactly.
It's so harmful to have this stigma in your head that anorexics are stick thin and severely underweight, because not only is that invalidating to everyone else who is struggling, like Katya and I were, when we were going to the doctors and our weight was normal and everyone was like, you're fine. We know that we're not. And sometimes that encourages people to want to get sicker, to make it known that they have a problem or feel validated in that. But also it's just, there's a majority of people who are struggling with anorexia who aren't stick thin, like who don't meet the stereotype of what it is. And there are a lot of thin people that don't suffer from anorexia. So it's just, I don't know, just this whole bias of what people think is just so wrong. And I think it's an important thing to address it, because there are a lot of people struggling, and there are a lot of people that aren't struggling that people think are struggling. So it's just, you never know what someone is going through. You never know how healthy they are. And that is to say, just don't judge anyone just strictly off of numbers and the way that they look, because those things only sell so much.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I mean, eating disorders don't have a body type.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you also, you can get help no matter how sick you are in your eating disorder too. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was going off of a little bit of a tangent, but I do think it's important to address, and, you know, I like to address different things on here as well. So I wanted to get a little bit more into your parallels between recovery and your performance career.
Yeah.
So I know you were in high school theater, you did community theater as well. When you were struggling, like in the depths of all of the behaviors, were you doing theater as well at the same time, or are you mainly just doing school?
I mean, I think this is really important to talk about, actually, because when I was deep in my eating disorder, I completely stopped musical theater. And that's because my eating disorder consumed so much of my life and so much of my time. And honestly, when I was in it, I remember saying, like, I don't even like theater. I was just like, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to do it. It wasn't as important to me. I mean, my true identity really got sidelined because of my eating disorder. And I don't think I really did any activities, honestly. Like, I think I just took up running, which is just such an eating disorder thing.
I know,
And so, no, I really lost big parts of myself in my eating disorder. And I also lost relationships too. I didn't have any friends, and my relationships with my family too just got destroyed completely. So yeah, not very great.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that brings up a huge point is, eating disorders are so isolating. That's the nature of them. They want you to only focus on that and nothing else. And in your case, that meant stopping doing the things that you love and stopping forming relationships and bonds with other people. And it is so sad that eating disorders do that, but it is truly the reality of them. I mean, I feel like sometimes throughout my eating disorder journey as well, I've kind of lost my love for singing, and I'm going to college for it. And it just goes to show that it's just such a hard and ingrained thing, and it's so isolating to the point, like I said, it makes you give up your passions. So I'm glad that you're still doing them now and you're able to get through that. But I want to hear about what Rizzo was like for you, and you said it had a lot to do with your recovery in that time and choosing recovery. So just tell me a little bit more about that.
So it was my junior year of high school, and the casting call came out for Grease, and Grease is my favorite movie. And so I was like, okay, I really want to audition for this. I really want to do this. So I went and I auditioned, and I got cast as Betty Rizzo. And Rizzo is one of my favorite characters. And so about a month into the rehearsal process, my mom pulled me aside and said, Katya, you're not doing so great, and I can see that. And if you do not get yourself together right now, I'm going to pull you out of the show. And I remember just feeling so much fear because I'm like, no, I want to do this show. I don't want to let my director down or any of my castmates down. And also, I know everyone will find out I'm struggling with something too if I have to drop the show a month in. And so it was really motivation to start recovery for myself. And I think that once I got into that habit during those months of the rehearsal process of really trying to choose recovery for myself, after the show was over, I was already in that habit of recovering, and I kind of just stuck with that. And of course there were ups and downs, but I really tried to stay strong in that. And so getting the role of Rizzo and being in Grease really gave me purpose to recover. I wanted to be on stage again. I wanted to feel alive again in that aspect of my life. And I also think that the performing arts world can also be such a double-edged sword though as well, because I definitely felt pressure to look a certain way in that role. I know Rizzo is portrayed as this desirable, sexy, confident woman, and I really wanted to portray that, and I really felt the pressure of wanting to look thin on stage, especially because everyone's just watching me there too.
Totally understandable.
And so I think that role just really held up a mirror of some of my hardest parts of recovery and also the most wonderful parts as well.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. And I love that mirror metaphor that you were talking about. I think that's super important and very insightful. I have a similar experience too, actually, when I was a senior and I was doing Legally Blonde.
Which you were super good.
Thank you. But I was L, and a couple months in to my rehearsal process, my mom too, she's been a super big catalyst for my recovery, and moms know everything, and she could see that I was still struggling, and she told me too, she was like, Elisa, if you don't get better, I'm pulling you out of this show. And I was like, oh my god, it's probably January or February, and the show was in March, and I was like, there's no way that I'm getting pulled out of this show. So it really was a big push for me to get my act together for the rest of my senior year to make sure that I was healthy enough to be able to perform, because performing, and you can jump in whenever, does take a lot of physicality.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. For sure. I mean, I needed to have enough energy to be on stage too, for sure.
Yeah, so. And breathing and dancing and memory too. I think that's not talked about enough. Like, you suffer a lot of memory issues when you are malnourished and under eating, and obviously when you're on stage, you the lines, the dance, the choreography, the staging, everything just has to be up there. So there is a lot of things that happen to your body when you're not feeding it enough. So I'm glad that Rizzo could be a character that you can look back on and kind of like see with a lot of, I don't know what the word is, like a lot of compassion.
Yeah, for sure.
I think when I look back on my role as Elle, I kind of think of that like, wow, like that role kind of changed me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think I really learned to understand that a powerful performance comes from presence and not appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I also forgot to mention was that during that time, it was fall semester my junior year, and during that time is when I actually met some friends too, because I was actually trying to recover.
Yeah.
And I think that also gave me reason to recover, because I was honestly so lonely before and I didn't really care. Mm-hmm. But then once I actually began to meet people and form some relationships, that also really gave me reason to want to get better and to want to be at school for lunch and to go out to football games and whatnot and all of that.
I'm so happy that you were able to have those last 2 years of high school and be able to be present, because I think that that's so important. And high school, there's so many formative friendships and just so many life lessons to be learned. And it's your next step to college. So I'm so glad that you were able to have that, and that I hope, correct me if I'm wrong, but your role in theater helped you. How did it help you? Like in terms of, I know you kept saying that your role as Rizzo, helped with realizing that good performance doesn't have to do with your appearance and all of that. But would you say that it kept you in the recovery process? Or I don't know, like what
I know what you're saying. I mean, there was a contributing factor to it, but you also you have to want recovery for yourself.
Yeah.
And you can't, I can't tie theater to being the only reason for me wanting to recover. And so, there was a lot of factors. I think one of the main things is, for me personally, I remember my mom also was like, you're not going to college unless you're recovered. And I was like, I don't want to be at home for another 4 years. And I also I hate missing school and all of that. And that being said, I think that if you need to get pulled out of school, it is super necessary. And you just have to do that because your health comes first no matter what. But, there's a lot of things that keep me recovered. Something someone once said that really stuck with me was that an eating disorder is like a weed. And if you don't eradicate its roots, it's just going to keep coming back, and it's going to keep coming back stronger.
Wow.
And that really connected with me, because I think I spent a lot of time in what I call partial recovery. And what that means is I had let go of more obvious extreme behaviors, but internally I was still holding on to a few small ones that really kept my eating disorder going. And that looks different for everyone, but for me it looked like, I don't know, for example, I would always take the long route instead of doing a short route when I was walking, or I wouldn't allow myself to sit down when I could be standing, or stuff like that. And they're the things that really kept me tied down to my eating disorder, and they were completely invisible to the people around me. You have to learn to let go of all the eating disorder behaviors. And I think a really key point here is that no one's going to tell you that you are holding on to those little behaviors, because they don't know about them. And so you yourself know your eating disorder the best, and you know what you have to do in order to recover. And the question is, do you want to recover, and do you want that? And if the answer is yes, then you have to let go of those behaviors, and that's the only way to reach full recovery.
Yeah, that was great. Wow. Like, I was just sitting here, like, just listening and taking it in, even for myself, because I'm, unlike you're fully recovered. I'm still going through my recovery process, and, it just, because it looks different for a lot of different people. But yeah, like the weed part, I think that metaphor is so important, because it is true that your eating disorder truly won't go away until you do eradicate those roots. And sometimes for certain people, they never eradicate those roots. Yeah. Because I've heard a lot about how eating disorders just stay with you your entire life, and it's something you're constantly battling. But it sounds like for you do you not have any thoughts anymore?
I don't have any eating disorder thoughts. I mean, it's kind of like surreal to me because I mean, if you asked me 2 years ago if I would get to this point and get to this point like quickly, I guess, too, I mean, I would not have believed you at all.
Yeah.
I did not think it was possible for me whatsoever. And but it is. I mean, it sounds really cheesy to say, but there really is light at the end of the tunnel. And I think another part for me is I've always wanted, even when I was struggling with my eating disorder, I've always wanted to help people with eating disorders. And so, and I know I want to be a really big inspiration. I want to be fully recovered for people who are really struggling so that they know that it is possible. And so I really wanted to get to that point too.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know.
Well, you're already an inspiration to me because I always felt like I was just going to struggle with whatever I was going through for the rest of my life. And, you know, that's just the way that my life is going to be. But just hearing you and hearing how happy you are is really inspiring for me, for one. And I hope everyone else, because I think with recovery comes a lot of fear. And for me, it's a lot of fear of the unknown. You know, I get fearful of what's going to change, if my body's going to change, and all of these things. And I think that all of these fears of letting go of all of my rules is what keeps me in my cycle of, you know, of my illness. But I think it's inspiring to hear all of you talk about how your recovery journey, you know, while it was hard and, you know, there were a lot of things that have gone on throughout that process, you did come out on the other end and like literally as a light, because you just feel so bright, and that's very inspiring to hear. So thank you so much for sharing, because I think that it is good for everyone to know that there truly is light at the end of the tunnel and recovery is possible, because for a lot of people, I think people think that partial recoveries are possible, but maybe full recovery is just out of the cards. But clearly that's not true, and hopefully that is something that everyone will be able to see throughout their recovery process as they continue. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this was a great conversation, and thank you again for being here. I have one last question, and that is, if you were to give a piece of advice to someone who is struggling right now, maybe they're not even beginning their recovery journey, or maybe they're partially recovered, what would your biggest piece of advice be for them throughout their recovery journey be?
Gosh, I feel like I have a lot of things to say.
It's okay. You can say like a bunch of like little things. Like,
okay. Well, okay. I think first, I think that anyone who is struggling with an eating disorder needs to have full weight restoration, because that's the foundation to all of recovery, and you can't think your way out of an eating disorder if your body is still in survival mode. And I know that extreme hunger is really common for a lot of people struggling with eating disorders and who are malnourished. And then the other aspect of it that people, I think, really undermine is that mental hunger is also such a real thing. Yeah. And that if you're thinking about food, you need to go eat, because that's your body's sign of asking for food. And your body's not trying to sabotage you. It's not broken, and it knows exactly what it needs to heal. And if you really honor that, like that's such a big step forward in your recovery. And so I think physical recovery really lays the foundation for emotional recovery. And I also just remember in my eating disorder thinking that I could like be the magical unicorn in recovery who like didn't have to gain weight. And it's just not true at all. This just has to happen whether you're societally considered underweight or not. It's just like your body has to learn how to be okay with food again. You have to teach it that it's okay. And that you will be okay mentally too. And so weight gain is just such a normal and natural process of recovery, and also just a natural thing in life too. And then also, let's see what my last thought is. There's another analogy that kind of helps me sometimes too, understanding recovery. And this is like for also people who aren't in recovery too, like understanding it, is that when my eating disorder was in control, I like to think of it as a car. Like my true identity, my true self was shoved into the trunk of the car, and my eating disorder was at the driver's seat, steering the wheel, steering my life. And so my process of recovery was really just trying to make my way back into that driver's seat. And so I fought my way back into the back seat and then the passenger seat. Yeah. And then I had one hand on the wheel and then I had both hands and I shoved the eating disorder into the trunk. And so, I don't know, it's just, yeah, that's what recovery is. And it's a learning process, and it's not all easy, but you will be okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Again, second analogy, I love it. But thank you so much for being here. It means so much to have people who are willing to be a part of my podcast and just being free to share their stories and, provide comfort to those who are still going through the recovery process, and letting everyone know that at the end of the day it will be okay. So thank you so much for being here. Of course. Yeah, thank you for having me. Of course. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. If you have enjoyed, I would really appreciate if you left a comment, subscribed, downloaded, do all the things, like the video, and also follow me on TikTok and Instagram at the Green Room Recovery Project. I try to post every single day, and it is a lot of educational content, everyday content, and little tips and tricks for the recovery process and things like that. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and see you soon for the next one. Bye!